And the real successful people in the Valley continue to be the missionaries, not the mercenaries.
Yeah.
The most successful entrepreneurs are those, in fact, who have failed. People make plans, organizations make plans, and there's only one time those plans look perfect. That's before you begin. And I'll tell you that the smartest people I've known in my life are in some ways the most humble people that I've known. Leaders are humans, so they are not infallible. They will make mistakes. Every one of us is capable of leadership. Every one of us is worthy.
Hi, viewers. My name is Upesh Jain. Greetings from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm the host of the Exec Talk channel, a forum I started to talk to CEOs, executives, and other luminaries about their journeys and distill their experiences and learnings for our viewers' benefit. My guest today is someone who is very accomplished and experienced and uniquely resident in the Silicon Valley. I'm truly honored to welcome Dr. Barry Posner to my channel. Dr. Posner is the Accolti Endowed Professor of Leadership at the Leavey School of Business, Santa Clara University, where he served as Dean of the school for 12 years. Santa Clara University is a Jesuit school nestled in the heart of Silicon Valley. This school, just like some of the other schools in the area, is a silent force that graduates a lot of the talent that makes Silicon Valley tick: engineers, entrepreneurs, managers, and leaders. Due to its location, the school is witness to a lot of the innovation and paradigm shifts that have occurred in the Valley and is closely associated with the Valley's who's who. A lot of its alumni have gone on to contribute in making of what the Valley is today. A lot of the credit goes to the school's faculty, who play a key role in this symbiotic relationship. Dr. Posner is experienced in education with a demonstrated history of working in higher education and consulting with a variety of public and private organizations around the globe. He has received several outstanding teaching and leadership honors, including the President's Distinguished Faculty Award and the school's Extraordinary Faculty Award. He has published extensively, including in the Harvard Business Review. He has been a visiting professor at several international universities and has lectured at conferences, TEDx, and workshops. He has worked with such organizations as Amazon, Apple, Applied Materials, Charles Schwab, Genentech, HP, Levi Strauss, Merck, to name a few, and has been involved with leadership development efforts at more than 50 college campuses. He is the co-author with Jim Kouzes of the award-winning and best-selling leadership book, The Leadership Challenge, which has withstood the test of time for over 2 decades. With over 3 million copies sold, the book has been described as a groundbreaking research study and has been translated into 22 foreign languages. Dr. Posner has also co-authored several other award-winning, inspiring, and practical books on leadership. He is an authority on the subject, and being resident in the Silicon Valley, has been working with many CEOs and executives of several successful companies. Dr. Posner received an undergraduate degree in political science from the University of California, Santa Barbara, a master's degree from the Ohio State University in Public Administration, and his PhD in organizational behavior and administrative theory from the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I myself was his student 20 years ago when doing my MBA, and have a signed copy of his landmark book, The Leadership Challenge, as you can see on the screen. And I also have with me here a little memento we were given when we graduated in 2001. So thank you, Dr. Posner, for making time for me and encouraging me in this endeavor.
My pleasure, and thank you for that very gracious, long but very gracious introduction.
Well, I wouldn't have done justice to it if it were any short. So it truly is applicable, and I really appreciate you making time for me.
Sure, I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I hope your viewers will find our conversation of interest.
Thank you. So, Dr. Posner, I'd like to start with some of the early influences in your life that shaped you into being where you are today, and what lessons stand out in your mind from that time.
So, how far do you want me to go back?
Whatever comes to your mind. I mean,
But it's interesting. This just yesterday here in the business school, we had a reception for first generation college students here at Santa Clara University, including first generation faculty members like myself. Parents who hadn't gone to college, who literally drove me from home to UC Santa Barbara with a suitcase, and I got out of the car and walked on campus, and that was kind of orientation to campus. And I think like lots of first generation young people, it's a kind of it's a tremendous opportunity to do something that your parents hadn't done, and probably for most of us that consider ourselves first generation, it's our parents who were working hard to make sure that we could benefit from getting an education and kind of moving on with our lives, and maybe doing something that they hadn't been able to do that. But I also mention that in the sense that one of the earliest times I learned about leadership without knowing it was leadership was my parents owned a small shoe store in Southern California, and after school daycare for my brother and I we came to the store and sat in the back and did our homework until we got old enough to be able to stock shelves or write up receipts when people bought a pair of shoes, or make change, or eventually, where I want to go with that is eventually learn something about customer service, and customer service is another way of thinking about leadership where I am now. It's really about how do I use myself to make other people better? I mean, that's what customer service is. How do I do something that I can do that will, in the shoe business, make this person feel, more comfortable, less stressed, more beautiful, whatever that might be. And we take that right into the workplace now. And before I was the dean, I was in charge of the graduate program here, and I called myself the chief customer service officer, because my job was to make sure that the students had a good experience going through our program. And I'll just really jump ahead. I think that we sometimes use the term servant leadership, but what that connotes is why would I want to follow somebody who didn't have my best interests at heart? I mean, that's the reminder that leadership is a relationship, and we want to follow people who we believe care about us and want us to be all that we can be. Otherwise, it's not servant leadership; it's self leadership. Students don't come into my classroom in order to make me look good. They come into the classroom with the expectation that I'm going to make them look. I'm going to make them smarter. I'm going to make them more capable. So without a lot of details, those are my humble beginnings, Upesh. So
yeah. I mean, wonderful. Actually, that's exactly what I wanted to touch upon, because a lot of people see you today in your current role, but they don't realize where you came from, and that's important in my mind, right?
Sure.
And that's what I want to capture as part of this conversation. So thank you for that. So, Dr. Posner, you've been in the Valley for a long time, and how do you define the
So
culture?
you're saying I'm old?
No,
Go
I'm
ahead,
saying
go ahead.
you're seasoned.
Okay.
And how do you define the culture of the Valley, and why has the Valley been a unique place for entrepreneurship, innovation, and leadership?
Yeah,
And how has it evolved over the years you've been here? I mean, there's always the pre-internet and post-internet phase, and you know that's transformative. And so
sure.
any words there? Yeah.
Well, it's, from the Valley of the Heart's Delight, from, agriculture to atoms, to
Mhm.
these little tiny things. Look, I think one of the things that's always been unique about the Valley, and 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 it's the DNA of innovation, is really the sense of collaboration,
Mhm.
is the is the sense of understanding. And I gave a TED talk on this years ago.
Mhm.
I sort of said, look, I said there's two important things that you need to know, and one is that you make a difference, and the other one is that you can't do it alone.
Correct.
So both are important. You need people who are willing to come up with bold, crazy, imagine to imagine things that have never happened before,
Mhm.
and an appreciation for the infrastructure that's necessary to make that happen. Because you can't do it alone. And in all the research we've done, from the early 1980s through now,
Mhm.
much of it centered around people here in Silicon Valley, have been the stories of people who have gotten extraordinary things done. And all of them tell the same sort of story about having a vision,
Mhm.
or as Andy Grove would say, a burning agenda.
Correct.
uh, there's something that they wanted to see happen, and they needed to get other people to share in that vision, from a workplace perspective, or share in that vision from an investment perspective, that
Mhm.
they in fact wanted to donate, wanted to invest their money, or wanted to invest their time and energy
Right.
into changing the world. And I think, the you know Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett, two of the early
Pioneer. Yeah.
pioneers in
Mhm.
this valley, you know and HP has gone through, is not the same company it was when they were here.
Mhm.
But the ethos is important, and that is, it's not the pursuit of money. If we serve people, if we serve a need, we will make money.
Yeah.
And the real successful people in the valley continue to be the missionaries, not the mercenaries.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and and it's that passion, I think, that continues to infuse current entrepreneurs. But here at Santa Clara, young people
Mhm.
have that same sort of passion of, there's a need, there's something, either something wrong or there's something better,
Yeah.
and they have an idea about what they could do. um,
Yeah.
so so that's, if you will, that's that's part of the the innovators culture.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, you mentioned Andy Grove. I've had the chance of seeing him in person, and I believe you've interviewed him or had a conversation with him in the past. He has a book, Only the Paranoid Survive, and that's part of the Valley culture. Besides the innovation and just totally out there, so to speak, ideas that make the
Well,
Valley.
yeah, certainly. And it's and for once, as Andy writes about in that book, but that sort of notion that, you can't rest on your laurels.
Mhm.
uh, that there's always somebody out there that thinks that they can do a better job than you're now doing. And so in that sense, I don't, there's a mixed metaphor here, but there's a target that somehow somebody's saying, well, yeah, they may do a great job, but I think I could do, I think I could make chips faster, more reliable, cheaper, whatever it might be. And so I better, if I'm Intel, I better, out innovate myself before some competitor comes along and does that. And that, he called it paranoia. But I think it was, something like Woody Allen said, well, you're not paranoid if that's real.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. None of us, we can't be just standing still. And that's about the pace of the valley too.
Right. And there's so many other leaders like Steve Jobs and now Elon Musk, and I mean, people who have transformative thinking and new ideas. So, and we're at the helm of this new disruption called artificial intelligence now. So we'll be witness to that as it unfolds.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Posner, a lot of things have to go right when starting a company for a successful exit. So why do most startups go belly up? I mean, you can tie that to the concept of leadership, if you will, but wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Well, because it's hard. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. We just, earlier this year, we published the 7th edition of the Leadership Challenge, and people sort of ask, well, why do you still need to keep writing books? Because it's hard. It's not easy to do. And in the social sciences in particular, any organization has a social science. It's not a perfect science. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen gives us water. We know that 2 and 2 is 4. But in dealing with people and people in organizations, you don't have that same kind of perfection. And so, a virus hits, and we call it a pandemic, and that happens a month before, a month after we open a new restaurant, or a plane flies into your building, or Russia invades Ukraine. I mean, there's, these are kind of world events. And yet,
still wagging the dog, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, innovation is starting something new is a risk, and not everybody's willing to take that risk. The most successful entrepreneurs are those, in fact, who have failed, and VCs would rather, venture capitalists would rather invest in somebody who's already burned through somebody else's money in some failure.
Right.
I mean, how do you get experience? You get experience by making mistakes. So we just have to kind of figure out, both at an individual level and at an organization, as a society level, how much are we willing to invest, if you will, in mistakes, because it's mistakes that are the fuel for learning to do things that we haven't ever done before, or we didn't think we could do.
Yeah. So well put, Dr. Posner. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to go right, I guess. And besides the technical aspect of the business or the startup, there's the people's aspect, and that's generally the biggest wild card, right? And so you can always benefit in that department from experience, or just coaching, or just doing things in a systematic manner.
Sure. Well, in your own career, people make plans. Organizations make plans, and there's only one time those plans look perfect. That's before you begin.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
you know, my co-author Jim Kouzes
Mhm.
was planning. His son and daughter-in-law were supposed to have a baby
Mhm.
next Tuesday, and
Mhm.
so they were all prepared to go down to Southern California,
Mhm.
and baby was going to be induced, blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Well, the mother had the baby last week. So
Yeah.
much for planning.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
instead of, leisurely driving down and all the plans that they had made, they got up in the morning and took a plane and, flew to Southern California. So much for plans.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens, I mean, we have to have a plan. It can't just sort of say, well, I think I'll just go
Mhm.
out and see
Mhm.
what happens in the world. We have to have a plan.
Right.
But really, in some ways, management happens when there are no exceptions to the plan.
Right.
Leadership happens when you're managing the ambiguity associated with the plan.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and so, um, so it's a, and again, different people have different tolerances for their ego strength, in terms of how much they can handle making mistakes.
Right.
We like to say that the best leaders are the best learners.
Mhm.
They're the ones that are, I mean, one of the things that makes a good uh, uh, entrepreneur or innovator is that they're open to new ideas.
Absolutely.
They actually, however smart they are, and I'll tell you that the smartest people I've known in my life
Mhm.
are in some ways the most humble people that I've known. They
Yeah.
are people who I believe are a lot smarter than me. And when I talk to them,
Mhm.
and I talk to them because I know that they're really smart, and
Yeah.
then they tell me about all the things that they still don't know and they're still trying to figure out. And
Yeah.
I and I'm
I
and I
mean,
walk away proud of them.
in one of my other interviews, I was talking to a serial entrepreneur, and he said being open is like being a sponge, right? You soak it in and then apply it to your situation, and that's how uh, gigs succeed or innovation happens as
Yeah,
well.
I mean there
Yeah.
are all kinds of clues around us right now
Hmm.
about the new next best thing.
Hmm.
Some of us are paying attention to that, and the rest of us are just living our lives.
Yeah.
Uh, Jim and I wrote our second book on credibility
Hmm.
in the mid 1980s. I was on sabbatical at the University of Western Australia in Perth,
Hmm.
and Jim was here in Silicon Valley, and
Hmm.
we were exchanging files back and forth on something called the ARPANET, kind of a
Hmm.
file sharing system that the universities and the government were using.
Okay.
Well, in retrospect, and we thought this was grand, but had we really thought about it carefully, Jim and I could have invented the internet. Because, but we just didn't realize the potential of
Yeah.
what it was that we were doing and how this we we were focused on writing this book,
Yeah.
but the technology that we were using,
Yeah.
had we given up writing the book and said no, let's see how we can make a business out of this. um, and so that's
Yeah.
happening right now,
Yeah.
in a variety of ways.
And I mean, a lot of the innovation is actually need based. There's a problem, and people are trying to build a mousetrap to solve that problem,
Yeah,
rather than intentional, right? That hey, this is my idea in a vacuum, and it'll be the best thing since sliced bread. So
yeah, in some ways in some ways that's harder. I mean,
yeah.
um, as a researcher, you always begin by
Hmm.
building upon the shoulders of the giants that have gone before you.
Hmm.
uh, and and the research is actually quite clear about this, that if you so here's an experiment. You ask people to think about the future. What do you think is
Hmm.
going to happen in the future? If I just ask one group to start today and think about, what are all the things they think could happen in the future, and write those things down. Then I ask another group, I say, okay, that's what I want you to do. But before you do that, I want you to think about your past. I want you to think about all the things that have been happening that have gotten us to today.
Mm-hmm.
Then think about the future.
Yeah.
Well, those people end up thinking about, have more ideas about the future and look out more years ahead into the future as they elongate from the past than those who just start kind of today from a cold start and just say, well, forget the past, let's just go into the future. So we really need to kind of understand a little bit more about kind of what's been happening and be able to see some trajectory, even when we may come up with discontinuous events or products or activities. But they don't come out of nowhere, you know.
Right.
There were other planets out there before Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos said, well, maybe I should build a rocket to go to another planet. I mean, they didn't make up the planets were there. And so
So, Dr. Posner, let's talk about leadership for a little bit. And you've been practicing that for a while. And so how do you define leadership, and is it an acquired skill? And how has it evolved over time, if you will?
Okay, so those are some good questions for the next few hours.
Just a brief peek into it, you know.
So here's there are in the academic literature, there are hundreds of definitions of leadership, and probably Upesh, every person you've interviewed in your podcast series here, you know, has a definition of leadership.
Absolutely,
That's both somehow kind of the good news and the bad news. I mean, the good news is that there isn't one model or mold. And the bad news sometimes is that we feel like leadership is something etherical or esoteric or magical, and therefore, you know, so why bother? Here's how we define leadership, and then I'll tell you why we chose those words. We sort of say leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations.
Beautiful.
And in that definition, we talk about the fact that leadership is an now. I will talk about leadership. I'll talk about leadership as a science, but it's not a perfect science. And so eventually, I can tell you, like any artist, I can tell you about paints and colors and brushes and canvases, and that's the science. That's the technology. But you and I can both know that, and we will paint different masterpieces. So there's an artistry, which I think in a world that's trying to appreciate diversity, wants to be able to say, well, each person, you know, is themselves an artist, and we want to allow for that self-expression. So sometimes when I'm, you know, involved in a coaching situation, somebody says, well, what should I do? As if there's an answer, you know, like, well, you should go left at the next corner. That's
for a formula.
We don't have that. Here's some thoughts about how you might think about that situation. But, you know, of course, you know, once we're done talking, you're going to go into that situation, and then it'll be raining that day, or the sun will be shining, or the person you're dealing with, somebody died in their family the day before, and we didn't talk about, well, Barry, what should I do when I talk to them if somebody died the day before I talked to them? How should I? We can't plan all those things. We can talk about some principles. So leadership's an art. The other thing about being an art is the fact that art is in the eye of the beholder. So we need to understand that part of what we need to appreciate is that no matter what we do, some people will look at that canvas and they'll say, I don't get it. Well, others will look at it and say, that's brilliant, or I see things there that not everybody's going to see. So we have to recognize that. Leadership is about mobilizing others. You know, few of us anymore have a landline. We have a mobile phone. It goes, so we are on the move. And leadership then is getting people up. It's getting them to move. We like to say leaders take us to places we've never been before. And so leadership is about mobilizing others, not just about mobilizing ourselves. It's not just, well, I'm willing to go there, but if there's nobody behind me, then it's hard to imagine that I'm a leader.
Right.
We say leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to. And when people want to do something, then the motivation, I'm not paying people to care about others, to do the best job that they can do. I'm hoping that they'll want to do the best job that they can do. Right. But there, and you were mentioning your kids earlier. The real issue is, what do they do when you're not around? So right. how do I get them to want to clear their dishes at the dinner table? Right. Want to tonight we're celebrating our grandson's he's going to be 7 years old.
Oh, congratulations! Yeah,
and I still have to remind him about lifting the toilet seat. So that because I can't be there all the time to supervise him. He's got to want to do that and understand why that's an important thing for a variety of reasons. So how do we get people to want to internally and want to do things long after I'm gone? That's an important part of any leader's legacy. And to understand that leadership's a struggle. If you're gonna want to get healthy, you don't sort of just go to the gym for 2 months and say, well, and now I'm done. And if you're going to sort of say, okay, I'm willing to go to the gym and get healthier, it means you're going to have, there's only so many hours in a day. It means you're going to have to not do something else. You're going to have to give up something in order to do this new thing. And it's probably going to be hard, at least at the start, because you haven't done it before. So I think it's important when we think about being a leader is to understand both I and others will have some heartache and some heartbreak and some tough times to be able to do something that's, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's not going to be easy. So we're going to have to struggle somehow. And then it's about, two important words here. One, it's about an aspiration, and aspirations are things in the future, don't exist today. They're higher order, they're meaning and purpose. Our aspiration, is to eradicate poverty in the world. Well, that's an aspiration. We're probably not going to achieve it in the world in my lifetime. But there are things we can do in pursuit of that higher order purpose. And once again, realizing that leadership is an art, I've got to get others to share that aspiration. I've got to get my grandson to share the aspiration that lifting the toilet seat, before he pees is for a variety of reasons. Something, is something that a good person would do.
Has to be a shared vision, right?
I mean, when he was younger, he just thought it was, it was a fun target.
Right.
He's growing up. He needs to know some other things. So we say leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. And
right. So Dr. Posner, I heard a TED talk of yours where you also bring up credibility under the umbrella of leadership. And I want to tie that to a question as to where leaders make mistakes, right? And, why, what's your observations? I mean, why do you think leaders make mistakes? They're empowered. They can make an impact, but where do they go wrong? And what are your recommendations to rectify those mistakes?
let me answer that question by tying back. You asked the question before.
Yeah.
Can leadership be acquired?
Yeah.
Right? It's another way of asking the question: are leaders born or made?
Absolutely.
Part of my answer to that question and the answer to this question is that leaders are humans.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not infallible. They will make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to learn something, learning inevitably requires people to do things that they've never done before. And the first time you do something, whether individually or organizationally, you're not going to get it right.
Yeah.
And in fact, studies of innovation suggest that most innovations are failures. Are failures in the middle. You start here and then you try something you've never done before, and you don't go up like that. You do something you've never done before, and you're going to go down. It's just a question of how fast you can learn before you start rising again. And then then most of us plateau out again and stop learning, to sort of, we're satisfied with where we are.
Right.
We're doing fine, and we stop learning, stop taking any risks, don't make any mistakes, and we plateau, and actually eventually we fall behind, and we go this way. So if we really want to go kind of continue that way, then we should understand, just like any sailor, I start here and I want to be here, but sailors understand it's only theoretically a straight line.
Yeah.
In reality, it's always back and forth, because there's things you can't control: the wind, the ocean, the time, all the currents, all of those kinds of things. So we take the point of view to the question: are leaders born or made? And I love to ask. I love it when the question comes up in a larger group, because I ask, so how many of you think leaders are born, and how many think leaders are made? And most everybody raises their hand and says leaders are made. And I correct them, because in fact the truth is that all leaders are born. We have no evidence to the contrary. In the same way that we say all engineers are born, and all mothers and fathers are born, and all bowlers are born, and all hockey players are born, and all accountants are born. These are all skills. These are all skills, and leadership is another one of those skills. Everybody's capable of it. Some perhaps more naturally than others. I mean, if you're tall, playing basketball seems to be easier than if you're short. But to be a good basketball player, you need something more than just being tall. All of us are capable of singing. Some people naturally have a better voice than others, but all of us can learn to develop our voices and sing better, without necessarily saying that everybody's going to be a pop music star. So our point of view is that leadership is something that could be learned, but you have to want to learn it. You have to be willing to get good coaching. Like watching your podcast today, get good coaching. And then, like any skill, then it's practicing. And if anything we've learned kind of in Silicon Valley is this notion of trying to fall forward. So we're going to learn. Let's not fall backwards. Let's ask the question, okay, this didn't work, so what do we learn from this, so that we can quickly adjust and keep moving forward.
See, I sometimes compare this to making mistakes to at least making a mistake is an act of action, right? And not stagnation, right? You mentioned some people will come and plateau, which basically is a state of stagnation. If you're making mistakes, you're still acting and learning from that, and in that manner moving the ball forward, right? So
the only
better
people
to make mistakes than not make mistakes.
I mean, look, it's not. Neither of us are saying, look, go out there and screw up. It's not about making mistakes on purpose, but it's understanding that in order to learn, you're going to have to do some things. You're going to have to experiment. I mean, if we thought about leaders as scientists, what is every scientist starts with and every engineer, starts with a hypothesis. I think this, writing code. I think this is the way it should go. And then you do it, and then you find out if it's software that there's some bugs, or there's some endless loops. There's some things that you hadn't thought about. There's some typos.
Yeah.
You didn't,
Absolutely.
You didn't make those typos on purpose, but you realized that the zeros and ones weren't kind of in the right order, or you did or that there was a better looping mechanism that you could have used and saved hundreds of lines of code. But you didn't know that a priori. You learn that through experience. So yeah, I heard somebody say, that the only people who are not making mistakes are the people who are not getting anything done.
Yeah.
So, you started earlier sort of talking about artificial intelligence. I mean,
right.
How is the machine getting smarter? It's getting smarter based upon the more mistakes it makes.
Absolutely. And a constant feedback loop and pattern recognition.
So I mean, and apparently, well, in some ways, it can do that faster than you and I can. And you and I can do it. It can take in millions of mistakes at one time and see the pattern and figure out how to avoid that. How to avoid that pattern the next time through.
Right. Dr. Posner, so it's been great so far. A lot of words of wisdom from you. One final question before we wrap up.
Sure.
What is your advice to young entrepreneurs and leaders of the world? The next generation, maybe, who are at the cusp of entering the workforce, or, maybe they've already jumped in but are in the initial stages.
Yeah. I wish it were as simple as what's the one word word of advice. Life isn't quite that simple. Here's what I try to do. So in my classes, workshops, coaching, books, I'm trying to change people's mindsets that in fact every one of us is capable of leadership. Every one of us is worthy. Every one of us has good ideas, and we have rotten ideas. But Linus Pauling, the Nobel Prize winning scientist, put it this way: if you want to have a good idea, have lots of ideas. It's the law of large numbers. And in order to embrace that concept, it means that you have to have enough self-confidence to know that making a mistake is not the end of the world. Sharing an idea with people and having it shot down, is not particularly in the American culture. Now, in some cultures, this wouldn't be true, but in our culture, and in lots of different organizations, we want people to come up with ideas that on first blush seem crazy, because that's the spark. That's the spark, and we're not somehow, we're not just putting it down by saying, well, that would never work, but rather sort of saying, well, gee, what would it take for something like that to work? What would we have to do to make something work? So my advice, is kind of twofold. It's one is to try to be clear about who you are and what's important to you, because most of the things that give us the energy to pursue future aspirations is having enough self-confidence so that when we have these ups and downs, we can continue to persist, because we know that these things are important to us, and we know that we won't always be right. And so having enough self-confidence so that when we're not right, we don't somehow shut down. We rather sort of say, well, it's like when
keep at it.
Yeah, when things don't go out the way that you expected them to, then then what can you learn from that? And I'm smiling because this morning I was with a group of undergraduate students and we were applying that to dating.
No.
So how do you know what how do you know what it is that's going to resonate with that that stranger that you've just met online or in person?
Mhm.
And so you have to kiss a lot of toads. You try some things and some things work and some things don't, and you try and kind of learn from that. And but all of that kind of in a style that's consistent with kind of your values and who you are and what's important to you.
Totally. Thank you. Also, what I was saying was in the American culture, it's less hierarchical. And, the gap between the upper echelons of an organization versus the leaf level is less. And, people are more accessible and open. Whereas in a lot of other cultures, it's strictly hierarchical and more rigid and unidirectional, which has its advantages, but might have more disadvantages than advantages. So,
well, particularly if we're looking to try to stimulate innovation,
right?
Right. If you're in an organization that says, I want you to innovate, but I don't want you to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you're in a culture, you'll hear oftentimes, the expression, we're going to cut down tall poppies. Mm-hmm. So we want everybody, like we really don't want people to come up with ideas because, we want sort of everybody to be the same.
Yeah.
Or you don't contradict your boss.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or the boss is always right.
Right.
So yeah, in Silicon Valley in particular, embraces the notion that we want to stay open, we want to stay nimble, we need to be quick.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be trying out stuff because there's I know that when I talk to executives in the larger companies in the Valley, mm-hmm. they're not as concerned about the other large companies as they are about all the small companies that they haven't heard about yet.
Right.
That want to become the big companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're the nimble ones. Yeah. So, Dr. Posner, thank you again.
Sure.
Really enjoyed talking to you, and again, appreciate your time, and look forward to talking to you again.
That'll be great. That'll be great. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. And again, I hope who's ever out there listening, I hope they found it interesting.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Take care. Bye now.